Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something, well, something foundational.
Truly foundational, yeah.
It's a concept that really sits at the root, and pun intended there, of how huge parts of Western thought see human nature or free will.
Our whole capacity for goodness, really.
Right, our capacity for goodness. It's the first step before you can even begin to talk about transformation.
That's exactly right. We're diving into the first point of that famous theological summary, the Tuolabee acrostic, specifically the T.
For total depravity.
For total depravity. And for you to get the most out of this, we have to start with the name itself. Because honestly, it's incredibly misleading. It causes way more confusion than it clarifies.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when I hear total depravity, my mind immediately goes somewhere horrific. I think most people confuse it with what you could call utter depravity.
Yes, utter depravity.
They think it means every single person is just as wicked as they could possibly be, like a cartoon villain.
It's a very common misconception, but it's not the teaching at all. If the doctrine was utter depravity, it would mean, that everyone is maximally evil all the time. And that just doesn't line up with reality.
Of course not.
The sources we're looking at point out that even someone like Adolf Hitler, who was paradigm of evil for many, still showed, basic kindness to his mother.
So the point isn't that humans are maximally evil or can't do things that help society. It's something more precise.
Far more precise. So I think we should just abandon the phrase total depravity for this discussion. Let's use a much clearer, more accurate term. Radical corruption.
Radical corruption. I like that. It immediately changes the focus.
And what's fascinating is the word itself. Radical. Comes from the Latin word radix.
Which means root, right?
Exactly, root. So this is saying that sin isn't just a surface level problem or, a bad habit. It's saying it penetrates to the very core, the root of our being.
Okay, so it's a root problem and the total part of the original name.
That refers to the scope of the corruption, not the degree.
Okay.
Total means the corruption affects the whole person.
Yeah.
The mind, the will, the body, the soul. Every part is influenced by the fall.
So there's no little island of righteousness inside us that's untouched.
Precisely. No safe harbor.
That distinction root versus surface, it reminds me of Jesus's analogy. A corrupt tree produces corrupt fruit. It's profound, really. We're not sinners just because we sin.
We sin because we are sinners.
Yes. The nature comes first, the action follows.
And that perfectly sets up the universal indictment Paul lays out in the New Testament. When Paul is summing up the human condition in Romans 3, he's pulling from all these Old Testament texts to build his case. And his conclusion is, well, it's devastating. He says all of humanity is under sin.
Meaning controlled by it, governed by our sin nature.
Yeah, exactly.
And he uses these really visceral images, like their throats are open tombs, their feet are swift to shed blood. It's a horrifying picture.
It is. And the capstone of it all is this universal negative. No exceptions apart from Christ. There's none righteous, no, not one. There is none who seeks after God.
And then the line that's key for us here, there is none who does good, no, not one.
That's the one.
Hold on. This is where it really seems to contradict everyday life.
I was waiting for this.
Yeah. If no one does good, how do we explain acts of charity or honesty or just basic decency? Society would just collapse into chaos.
It's a fair challenge, and this is where the reformers came in with a really crucial distinction. They called them works of civil virtue.
Okay, so define civil virtue.
It means deeds that, on the outside, conform to God's law. So an unregenerate person can absolutely refrain from stealing. They can volunteer. They can run an honest business.
Outwardly, the action looks good, and it's good for the community.
It is definitely good for the community. But the deep dive here is about the motive, right? The engine behind the action. And God evaluates the action based on the motive, not just the outward deed. For an act to be truly good in an ultimate spiritual sense, the motive has to be a love for God and a desire to glorify Him.
So an outwardly good deed that comes from a heart alienated from God isn't actually a good deed in that ultimate sense.
It's not.
That sounds incredibly cynical. It makes it seem like every good deed is just hiding some kind of self-interest.
And that tension is real. But this is where someone like Jonathan Edwards is so helpful. He analyzed this and called the motivation enlightened self-interest.
Enlightened self-interest. Let's expand on that.
It means we often do virtuous things not because we love righteousness for its own sake, but because we love the benefits virtue brings us.
Or we fear the consequences of not being virtuous.
That's a huge part of it. You obey the speed limit. Why? To avoid a ticket,
Yeah.
you return a lost wallet because you want to keep your good reputation, or avoid the guilt if you get caught.
So it's transactional. The motive is self-protection or self-promotion.
Yes. And that's key. If I do some great act of charity and get a lot of applause, my motive can easily shift from honoring God to honoring myself. The act is good on the surface, but the root, the radix, is still self-centered.
So to really get this, we have to go back to the source of the problem, right? To original sin.
We do.
And again, the term can be tricky. Original sin is not the first sin Adam and Eve committed.
No, it's the result of that sin, the inherited corruption. It's like damaged spiritual DNA passed down to everyone.
And that idea sparked one of the biggest debates in history.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The huge controversy between Aurelius Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo, and the monk Pelagius back in the 4th and 5th centuries.
Pelagius's view sounds very modern, very appealing. He was defending human ability.
Totally. His logic was, if God commands something, we must have the ability to do it. Otherwise, God would be unjust.
So for him, human nature is still basically good. Sin is just, what, a surface-level mistake?
An accidental change, he called it, not an essential root-level corruption. So Adam's sin only affected Adam.
And our wills are still totally free, not predisposed to evil?
Exactly. If you choose evil, it's just a choice, not the result of a damaged nature.
And Augustine's counter was all about the necessity of grace.
Yes, for him, the fall fundamentally broke something in us. He called humanity a massa peccati, a massive sin, totally unable to do anything truly good without God's grace starting the process.
He had that framework of ability, right?
He did, and it's a really powerful way to see it. Before the fall, Adam had what he called posse non peccar.
The ability not to sin.
Right. He could choose good or evil. But after the fall, we're left with this crushing reality, non posse non peccar.
The inability not to sin.
The inability not to sin, meaning our only real freedom is to choose which sin we'll commit.
Wow. And that ancient debate is still so relevant. The idea of mankind's basic goodness is, it's a core belief of modern humanism.
You see it everywhere, in therapy, in self-help books, in movies where the hero just needs to find their inner strength.
That's pure Pelagianism.
It is. The idea that if you just try hard enough, the good inside you will win.
When, according to this doctrine, trying harder is just a more enlightened form of self-interest.
It all connects. And this became so critical that later documents, like the Westminster Confession of Faith, had to spell this out very, very clearly.
So if we accept this idea of radical corruption, the focus has to be on our moral inability.
Yes. The Westminster Confession puts it in really stark terms. It says, man has wholly lost all ability of will to any spiritual good accompanying salvation.
Wholly lost, not just damaged, a complete loss of that spiritual capacity.
A complete and radical loss.
Okay, but this brings us back to that paradox. If we're so corrupt, how do we make choices at all? If the will is bound, how are we responsible?
That is the question. And the key is to distinguish between choice and desire. Both Augustine and Calvin would say, we keep our liberum arbitrium, our ability to choose voluntarily. We aren't robots.
We lose libertas.
We lose libertas, spiritual liberty, the freedom to choose what is spiritually good.
So we're like a voluntary slave.
That's it. Calvin's term was ephiladoulos. We sin freely because we want to sin. We choose what we desire, but our desires themselves are bound by that corrupt root.
So the problem isn't the machine of the will, but the fuel that runs it, the desire.
And this is where Jonathan Edwards' distinction is just. It's the absolute essential takeaway from this whole dive.
Natural ability versus moral ability.
Exactly. He said we keep our natural ability. Our mind works, we can reason, we can physically choose to do things. If a righteous choice was appealing to us, we could do it.
But the moral ability is what's lost. We don't have the righteous desire.
We don't. We are morally unable to choose the good because we literally cannot freely choose something we have no desire to choose.
Can you give us an analogy for that? Because it's a very technical point.
Okay. Think of a powerful magnet. It has the natural ability, the power to attract metal. But what if its polarization was completely reversed? It still has the power, the natural ability. But its very nature now compels it to repel iron. It's morally unable, in a sense, to attract the very thing it was designed for. It can't desire it.
So our will still works, but its nature is fixed on repelling God.
That's the idea.
That makes that phrase from Ephesians, dead in trespasses and sins, so much clearer.
It does. It's not biological death, of course. Corpses don't sin. It's spiritual death. A state of total alienation where we are, as the texts say, altogether averse from good.
fulfilling the desires of the flesh and the mind.
And acting as willing disciples of a force opposed to God.
So let's circle back to that line from Romans. There is none who seeks after God. What about all the people who seem to be on a spiritual search?
That's a great question. And Thomas Aquinas had a really sharp insight on this. He said people absolutely seek things like happiness, peace, and fulfillment.
Benefits that ultimately only God can provide.
Exactly. But they want the gifts without wanting the giver. They want the effects of God peace, meaning while fleeing from God himself. We're still hiding in the garden, you know.
So a true search for God doesn't end at conversion.
It begins at conversion.
Yeah.
Before that, we're just looking for ways to get what we want without having to submit to the Creator.
And if this inability is so complete, then the solution has to come from outside of us.
It has to.
Which brings us to what Jesus said in John chapter 6. It's maybe the strongest statement on this.
It really is. A universal negative. He says, "No one can come to me unless it has been granted to him by my Father."
And that word "can" there. It's about ability, not permission, right?
It's the Greek word dunamai. It means power, ability. It's not that we aren't allowed to come. It's that we don't have the moral power to come on our own.
It really is the ultimate statement of dependency. And you can see why we resist this. We're all, by nature, Pelagians. We want to believe we have that ability.
Of course. And that very resistance kind of proves the point. But the good news in this diagnosis is that because the inability is total, the solution is entirely grace. When God converts someone, he frees him from his natural bondage under sin and enables him, by his grace alone, to finally will what is good. He changes our desire.
So this has been a deep dive into the difference between utter depravity and total or radical depravity.
A problem of the root.
And we've landed on that critical distinction between natural ability, which we have, and moral ability, which we've lost.
And this all points toward an ultimate definition of freedom. Think about God. He is totally free, yet he is morally unable to sin.
Because he never desires to.
He never desires it. And that lack of desire for evil enhances his freedom. It doesn't diminish it.
So the goal in the end is to be so free that we lose the ability to sin because the desire is just gone.
Completely removed.
Free.
Free only for goodness.
Okay, so here is a final provocative thought for you to take with you. The Apostle Paul describes his own struggle as a Christian in Romans 7. He says, "The good that I will to do, I do not do." It's this constant internal conflict.
The battle between the new nature and the old.
Right. Now, if the natural, unregenerate person is in full bondage to sin and has no such struggle, what does that tell us about the continuous, uninterrupted state of their desires? What does the absence of that conflict truly reveal about the quality of their will? Think on that until the next deep dive.
Until then, stay curious.